Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. In this week's show, we will be exploring introvert myths, tips to help communicate with introverts, and tips to help introverts communicate with others. Slightly different format this week, as I'm absolutely delighted to be running the show with a good friend of mine from the US, Chelsea Brook-Cole. Chelsea helps forward-thinking introverts build self-trust and self-confidence to create healthy relationships and a purposeful career. But just a quick advert first for Performance Through People, a 5-day summit from April 12th to April 16th. 11 ways to unlock the quieter talent in your business. It's a summit for HR professionals, business owners, and leaders who want to increase productivity from their teams while increasing staff loyalty and reducing staff turnover. Get your free tickets by clicking on the link in the sleeve notes to this episode, introvertinbusiness.co.uk/performance through people. See you there. Welcome, Chelsea.
Hello, thank you so much for having me again, John.
Brilliant to see you back again. Just before we dive into talking about introversion in terms of things that you see, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert?
Yes, I've always known I was an introvert, INFJ in particular.
Okay, and what's that meant to you? Because it means different things to different people.
That's a really good question. I know we spend a lot of time thinking about what introversion is and isn't. And I know, the most common way to describe it is the introverts gain their energy from being quiet, and then extroverts gain their energy from being around other people. But I think I've really settled on the definition of it's just a preference for a quieter life. It's really the ability to, see through all of the distractions and to appreciate the small things, to know, what matters most, and to really enjoy an essentialism kind of lifestyle. So just a preference for a quieter life.
I like that. That's really good, as you say, a preference. That ties in whether you want to call it energy or not, but it still brings it all together. Thank you. One of the things we were talking about before we started was introvert myths and communications with introverts and with extroverts. What's the biggest introvert myth you see when it comes to communicating with introverts?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think the biggest one that comes to mind is the myth around introverts in group, especially true, even if we're in person or virtual, we're still, engaging in a lot of group meetings. And I think the biggest myth I see there is that people think we're not engaged or we're not, participating as much. Introverts are often reprimanded for not participating in groups because we're not speaking. And I think that's one of the biggest myths, is that you have to be talking to be participating, because introverts are participating by giving you eye contact, by staying focused, even by taking notes or looking off into space where you think they're not focusing. That actually probably means they're listening, they're reflecting, they are making connections between what you're saying and their own thoughts. So I think that's one of the biggest myths, is that we're not participating. When we are, we just do it differently.
I think that leads to one of the crazy situations that I often hear about. In fact, somebody was talking to me about it earlier today. They've been told by their boss that they should speak up more in meetings. And they said, but I do. And he said, well, you don't always. Quite often you're quiet. And so she said, yeah, but that's because I can't add anything. And he said, well, I just want you to say something. I mean, what is it about? It just seems crazy if everyone just starts repeating things just so that they can say something, which, I don't know, seems a strange world, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that is definitely not how introverts work. We hate doing things that feel inauthentic, or just speaking to speak, or to hear ourselves talk. You just won't hear an introvert doing that. So I'm sure that was really disconcerting to your client who said that.
Absolutely, yeah. 'Cause I mean, the other one that I often hear is that introverts are a bit slow, and that always makes me go, no, we think differently. It's kind
Uh,
of, I come back to this, some people talk to think, and other people think to talk.
mm,
And if you think to talk, there might be a second or two while you think, but
yeah, and I think
what
that's
comes out of your mouth is better organized.
right. Yeah, I think people could benefit from thinking a little more before they talk.
Absolutely. That's spoken like a true introvert. I love
I
it.
know, right?
Uh, what else do we see in the introvert extrovert kind of interaction area?
Yeah, another big one, especially at work, is that introverts are often overlooked or dismissed as not knowing as much as their extroverted counterparts, often for the same reason, because they aren't talking as much. But that's something that I actually admire about introverts is a lot of times we don't feel the need to go around talking about our achievements or talking about what we're doing. And that often comes from a place of humility. You know, we don't want to appear like we're bragging, which of course we can talk about ways to get around that. But I think for other people, like extroverts on the other side of that, they assume we don't talk about, you know, our achievements because we haven't achieved much. But in reality, we just, you know, see something that needs to be done and we go and solve it. And then we don't always think about bringing that up to other people.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I had that one. I was running a session every Monday on Clubhouse, and today one of the people was sitting there saying how in the past he used to be a town councillor and he had got a load of stuff done, but he'd done it all quietly and in the background. Whereas some of the other people spoke a lot and shouted about, but didn't achieve anything. And then when he stepped down, he just stepped down, and one person came up to him and said, "We really respect you for what, the fact you just got on and did your stuff." And that just meant so much to him. He didn't have to shout about it. Somebody recognized him, and that was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, even introverts, we all want to be acknowledged for what we've done and what we've achieved. It's just we often just don't even think about sharing it with others. But I've found that if you can even, you know, naturally put it into a conversation that you're having, talking about a project that you're working on, or asking someone what they're doing, and then it feels a little more natural to share about what you're doing. So there are ways around it where you don't have to feel like you are, you know, going around and talking about everything that you're achieving. You can do it in a way just to fit it into the conversation so it's feels more natural to you and it's more authentic, I think, to being an introvert.
I think that's a really important point, and I know that crops up quite a lot because many introverts, as you say, don't want to brag. So the more that you can structure that into general conversation, it feel a lot more comfortable for introvert, but also for people that are managing introverts to perhaps give some structure to time when they can just give them that feedback and they can have a quiet discussion on the achievement. I think that's a really important one. In that way, they can actually, rather than just say, "Hey Chelsea, that was great," they can actually give the feedback in a much more detailed way, which the introverts can use as internal validation and therefore believe a lot more and value a lot more rather than just being told, "Oh yeah, that was great. Oh, thank you."
Yeah, we really like to see how our contributions are making a difference. So, as a leader, if you can, you know, tie a certain objective or a certain task to the larger purpose or mission of the company or a specific mission that you're on, that can make a really big difference for introverts because we really appreciate things that are meaningful. We like to know exactly how our contributions are being used. We don't like to feel like we're wasting our time. So that's super helpful for leaders to make that connection between what you're doing and specifically how this is furthering the company's mission or really helping in some way.
Great point. So we're kind of starting to move towards the end, but what I always like to do is pick out a tip for an introvert, and then I'll ask you for a tip for a non-introvert to communicate with an introvert.
Yeah, two very great questions. For introverts, especially at work and in group, I will say that some of the biggest things that have been helpful is just coming to meetings prepared with questions, comments, things that you would like to make sure that you add, and try to do that in the beginning of the meeting if at all possible. I know that the longer the meeting goes on and the more you have this thing that you want to say, but then, you never quite find the right time. Anxiety builds. And then by the end of the meeting, you have to rush through your statement, or you leave the meeting beating yourself up and feel guilty for not having engaged. So coming
Brilliant
prepared,
tip,
yeah, coming prepared and then saying it at the beginning can be
I think
helpful.
the other one that goes hand in hand with that is if you've got that preparation, also whoever's preparing the agenda or running the meeting, tell them that there's a point that you need to raise on that subject, because then you can get that one in rather than you going, I want to say this. Somebody can actually say, so would you like to add? And how about for people that are communicating with introverts? What do you find helps?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of tips here. Even thinking about what you were just talking about, if you are a leader running a meeting, then handing out that agenda even 24 or 48 hours beforehand, and giving it to all of the staff members so that the introverts and extroverts alike have time to look over that and think about what they might want to say. So that's definitely helpful for leaders. I would also say, especially if you're talking to an introvert, we really appreciate people who listen to understand and not just respond. Like, we hate feeling like we're wasting our time because the person isn't really listening or you're distracted. If you're going to be distracted, that's fine. Just schedule a different time to talk with us when you can be present and engaged and listen, and you're able to share those validating statements and say, I hear you, I see what you're saying, because that will really mean a lot to an introvert, and will help in performance and communication and everything.
Great point. I like that. Listen to understand, because there are some people that seem to just listen for no reason at all, I think.
Yeah. Or just for
So,
that silent pause for them to say something.
yeah. So, Chelsea, between April the 12th and the 16th, there's a summit called Performance Through People, where there's 2 or 3 speakers every day. You're one of the speakers, and it's a summit especially for HR managers and leaders who want to get more from their people. What's the main thing that you're presenting on?
Yeah, I'm delighted to be a part of this summit. So the particular topic that I will be talking about is how to communicate with introverts for maximum performance. And the main 3 objectives that you will be able to take away from this talk is, 1, knowing how to identify whether you're talking to an introvert or an extrovert. I'm sure that can be, difficult at first because everyone doesn't go around saying they're an introvert or an extrovert. So what are the things that you can be looking for to let you know who you're talking to? The second tip is really around communication, and specifically what to do when talking to an introvert and what not to do when talking to an introvert. Because you really want to make sure that you are fostering, their trust in you and their development in the company. So you want to make sure that you're talking to them in a way that's most effective. And then the last tip would be specifically for leaders, whether you are an introvert or an extroverted leader or not. How can you communicate and make the most of your specific strengths when talking to your employees?
Fantastic. It's going to be a great presentation. I really look forward to hearing it. I know that people can get tickets. They're still available at introvertinbusiness.co.uk/performance through people. And that's performance through people. Chelsea, what's your website if people want to get back in touch with you?
You can find me at chelseabrookcole.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having this discussion. It's been great to speak to you, and I look forward to seeing you in April.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.